good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this Thursday morning for Daily Devotions through Redeeming Life Fellowship. It is so good to see you all. You're all looking very lovely, I'm sure. And today we're going to continue through our daily devotions through the Revive School reading plan that's going to lead us through the Pauline epistles and lead us a few steps further into chapter 3 of 1 Timothy. Chapter 3 of 1 Timothy that we're going to be discussing today, which deals with, as probably some subtitles in your chapter headings in the Bibles that you're reading, whichever version you have, talking about qualifications for overseers or bishops, as some translations render it, and then qualifications for deacons, or a more literal translation of it would be just servants, as it's used elsewhere or described elsewhere in the New Testament. What I think this particular passage, what makes it so important for us as Christians is that, well, in the first place, as Paul is writing to Timothy, he knows that eventually Timothy is going to carry on the work that Paul isn't going to be able to. And that Paul has brought Timothy along on these missionary journeys and spreading the gospel, and that Timothy's been not only a critical piece in sharing the gospel and seeing the gospel mission come to fruition, but that Paul knows that he has to pass the work and pass the mission, pass the torch on to Timothy in a way that that he doesn't just continue what Paul is doing, but that he excels in it, and he challenges the next generation to keep the mission of the gospel alive. All of that is in view when we're reading a book like 1 Timothy, so that all of us are encouraged to think like Timothy, who's hearing Paul's words and saying, I've worked beside you, Paul. I've traveled the world around. We've risked life and limb together, and we've reached this point. And Timothy, he's pastoring this church in Ephesus, a church that Paul founded, and so now he's the one who's overseeing and trying to keep ministry going in the way that it's supposed to go. That's a challenge, certainly, for all of us, because he's been through so much, and now he implores him to keep waging the warfare as it is, to remain faithful, that you've done so much. Now, whatever you do, don't give up. That's important for all of us, whether we're pastors like Timothy, or whether we're overseers, he's going to oversee, or deacons, or even just people who are coming to church, is that it's easy for any of us to lose the war of attrition, that we can keep certain things up and following Jesus for so long, but then eventually we give way to pressures that overcome us and weigh us down and render us unfruitful in the end in the sight of God. Paul doesn't want that to happen. He knows that's a temptation for all of us, and he doesn't want that to happen. He's not going to see that happen to Timothy, and he doesn't want to see that to happen to his overseers. He doesn't want to see that happen to his deacons, and he certainly doesn't want to see that happen to us. Another thing about the qualifications for the overseers and for deacons is important for all of us for at least two reasons. One of them, as he says, if anyone aspires to be an overseer or a bishop, he aspires a good thing. The motivation to aspiring it can oftentimes be mixed, for one of them being that it means that you're sitting and filling an office that actually has authority, that you can speak authoritatively in certain scenarios, situations, into people's lives, and that people who occupy that position of authority have more power. And when you have more power, you have a greater capacity for good and also a greater capacity for harm. And that you have to be aware of those sorts of things, and that you're not just simply choosing people based upon their capabilities, but you're choosing people based upon their character, and what God is shaping that person to be. And then also for us who look up to people who are, deacons and bishops or overseers, pastors, that sort of thing, teachers, it's easy to want to choose them based upon their capabilities and not upon their character. And that what Paul expects from these overseers and servants, these deacons, is that they're not just simply going to lead and to serve based upon their capabilities, but because these are the people who set a good example for life and godliness for everyone else, so that the authority that's over them is one that reflects the heart of God and the mission of the gospel and God's calling upon each of our lives, his claim upon our lives to live holy and blameless before him. So that we follow these people not just simply because they have an authority over us, but because they live a godly example, to say, I want to reflect what he's doing. I want to do what he's doing, because that life is fruitful, it's godly, it's holy, and it's good. So it's something kind of fun, I think it's to me. We're going to read 1 Timothy chapter 3 and focus on verses 1 through 13. I want you to think, in what ways are the qualifications for a overseer in the first place different or similar to the qualifications for a deacon? And let's read it together. And it says, the saying is trustworthy. I need more coffee. Not that saying, but you know what I mean. If anyone aspires to the office of overseer, he desires a noble task. Therefore, an overseer must be above reproach, the husband of one wife, sober-minded, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not a drunkard, not violent, but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. He must manage his own household well, with all dignity, keeping his children submissive. For if someone does not know how to manage his own household, how will he care for God's church? He must not be a recent convert, or he may be puffed up with conceit and fall into the condemnation of the devil. Moreover, he must be well thought of by outsiders, so that he may not fall into disgrace, into a snare of the devil. So interesting that there's snares of the devil that are related to either being elevated too high and getting puffed up for conceit, or falling too low into disgrace, into a snare of the devil. So staying the course, as it were. And so deacons likewise must be dignified, not double-tongued, not addicted to much wine, not greedy for dishonest gain. They must hold the mystery of the faith with a clear conscience, and let them also be tested first, and let them serve as deacons if they prove themselves blameless. Their wives likewise must be dignified, not slanderers, but sober-minded, faithful in all things. Let deacons each be the husband of one wife, managing their children and their own households well. For those who serve well as deacons gain a good standing for themselves, and also great confidence in the faith that is in Christ Jesus. So if you just compare those two criteria for qualifications for a deacon or an overseer, the thing that you're going to find out is not so much how different they are, but how strikingly similar they are. Deacons likewise. In order for the church to be led well by example, the standard for character is just as important for somebody who's an overseer, for somebody who's a servant, in that God isn't maintaining a different standard of holiness or godliness for someone who is a pastor or an overseer or somebody who's a teacher. Now, granted, each of us, none of us is perfect, and that hence the reason why he says that an overseer must not be a recent convert. There is some measure of growth and maturity and fruitfulness that has to be in place before somebody's put into a position of authority. But it's important for us, certainly, is that it's easy to want to think that there's a different standard of godliness that goes up and up and up and up and up the higher you go up the hierarchy, and that there's lower standards of character for somebody who's in a lower position. And I don't think Paul is going to have any of that. The standards for godliness, if the whole church is going to have a fruitful life in Christ Jesus, has to be the same across the board. And this is important. I can't remember if I said it already, but that it's easy to want to look to our leaders and follow them based upon their capabilities, whether they're a good teacher, a good preacher, or if they're funny like Jesse, they have charisma, or they have power, or they have great messages. All of those things are well and good. But I hope the criteria that we maintain for our leaders is based principally on the criteria that Paul has given Timothy and has given for us. That our main reason for following anybody and submitting to their authority is because that authority is substantiated and is qualified by the work of the holiness of God, molding that person into a character who reflects the image and the glory and the goodness and the holiness of God. That's the kind of person I want to follow. That's the kind of person I want to be. That's the kind of example I need to set. That's eventually, if you follow that example in your leaders, that's the example that God intends you to set, Bryce. That he intends you to set, Faith. That he intends you to set this example, Bree and Beth Ann. He intends you to set this example, Glenn. This is the way in which God is leading us in all of our pitiful, sorry states that are corrupted by selfish gain and addiction to substances and anger and malice and querulousness and laziness. All of those things have to go if we're going to be the sort of people God has called us to be. And I hope that after reading something like this, that our hearts are going to be in the right place. Not just simply how we lead, but also how we follow. So thank you so much for taking time for daily devotions today. If you haven't, please click subscribe to this YouTube channel so you get daily notifications for our videos. And I'm looking forward to seeing you next time, be it Monday here or the videos that Jesse's puts out, or on Sundays and Wednesdays when we meet here. I love you all very much, and I will see you next time.